guard who's come in, and he's bringing news that dogs are barking.
It's got to be carrying on. He won't stop.
Number go! Not here. Heat to arm!
The soldiers are exiting the fort so that they can go and investigate the cause of the alarm. Thank you, folks. Refugees in the fort!
Quickly!
Everybody file in. Calm down. You can imagine these men, they went out to investigate the cause of the alarm, and there's dead silence in here as they sat and waited to find out what was happening. It's 8, 9 o'clock at night, and there's no idea what's going to happen, what they're going to be receiving out there. So the air of intensity inside the fort must have been... This man is holding his fire because he doesn't want to shoot his own men.
Get him inside! We have a wounded man! We saw something in him down! To the loopholes! Yeah, just leg up. Commence firing! Quickly, let's go!
Folks, let's move to the next room.
Fire, fire!
Quickly!
Water. I need 3 men to move to the other barracks! No.
Go ahead, please.
Get away from the
Take
loopholes.
your wall. Take your walls.
Loopholes, fire! Fire quickly! Sergeant Melius, take command in here!
Boys, give him the hot stuff! Fire! Ooh. Sometimes guns don't fly.
Pick.
You have a pick?
No, I'm gonna get pick.
Gotta get another gun, excuse me. Give them 3 more rounds.
Aim for their muzzle flashes! Look carefully. Behind the books! See them?
How many more rounds, sir?
Getting low on ammo. They're withdrawing. Fire once you're loaded.
I'm out! Cease firing! Any man loaded? I am, sir. Fire it! Do not reload! And just as fast as that battle began, it ended. Do you think it's safe out there? No. You had the whole rest of the night to think about that. To sit and wait, listening for more. Can you fathom what it was like to be in that fort in that time? Stay put while I get the colonel. You've been given the all clear. Follow me. Folks, that's just a glimpse, an attempt of a glimpse of what was experienced here 260 years ago. Nothing can compare to the actual musket fire, the report of musket balls hitting the sides of the fort. There's a massive thud when a lead ball hits the inside of that fort. Hearing the screams of the warriors as they descended upon the soldiers would have been absolutely unnerving and terrifying inside of there. And then it was silent. Hugh Waddell was able to keep Fort Dobbs safe with only 2 men wounded, one of whom had died at some time after the battle, and a small boy that was killed prior to the battle. but he could not keep the frontier safe. Just 11 days after the attack here at Fort Dobbs, there was an attack 1 mile up that way at Moses Potts' house. A group of soldiers and militia had gone out to look for supplies when they were ambushed. We know the name of one man who survived that ambush. His name was Robert Campbell. He was shot in the body, shot in the shoulder, and had been scalped, and that man crawled the mile back to the fort. These types of attacks continued until June of 1760, all over the frontier of North Carolina, between the eastern side of what's now Winston-Salem and the Catawba River. Nobody was safe here. These were revenge attacks. Now in June, they suddenly stopped, and that's because a British army began invading the Cherokee lands through South Carolina. These men in this invasion force, these British soldiers, are the same men who had fought side by side with the Cherokee in 1758 as allies. Archibald Montgomery was the commanding officer of the expedition, and he wrote a letter to his brother in the midst of this campaign. He said, "South Carolina and Virginia have begun yet another war, this time with our friends." The last line of the letter read, "In my heart, I do believe the Cherokee have been more harshly treated than folks will tell. I believe they are justified." That is a British officer saying that his enemy is in the right and the colonists are wrong. Archibald Montgomery's force of 1,800 soldiers made it as far as Ectoy Pass. This is just 3 miles south of the Cherokee town of Niquossee. Niquossee is modern-day Franklin, North Carolina. 3 miles south of Niquossee, Montgomery ran into fewer than 600 Cherokee warriors, and they inflicted such heavy casualties on the British that the British were forced to retreat all the way back to Charleston. In the retreat, they burned 5 Cherokee towns. The following year, in 1761, the British sent another army, this time almost 2,800 men. They got to Niquossee, and the Cherokee could not put up any defense because their supplies had been cut off. The British had been their ammunition and gun suppliers. They had no ammunition supplies, and they're running out of ammunition from attacking the forces of the frontier and the British army that had invaded the year before. This time, the army took the town of Niquossee, and they established a base camp from which they spent the next 3 days burning 18 Cherokee towns. They destroyed 1,500 acres of crops. Francis Marion was a young sergeant. Everybody know the Swamp Fox? He was a famous Revolutionary War partisan. He was a young sergeant in Middleton's regiment during this campaign. He wrote, "When we put torch to corn, I began to weep." He realized that they destroyed the homes and food of over 4,000 Cherokee men, women, and children. That ended the war. We're going to go over to the fire here, and you're going to have a chance to talk to some people. They are enrolled Cherokee and Shawnee men. And you'll have the chance to ask them, talk to them about their version or view of the experiences here.
The hero can do it.
The hero. How are y'all doing this evening?
Great.
What did y'all think of that? Exciting, yeah. Yeah, it certainly was exciting. But yeah, I heard a little bit of what Sergeant Milius was telling y'all, and I'm sure you got to hear a little bit of their perspective. But just right off the bat, before we kind of get into this, do any of you have any questions to satisfy any curiosities before we get rolling and talking about these things?
I had a question about when the Cherokee were returning, like what started the war when the Virginians killed them. They were just passing through
Malachi, you want to?
Well, it's some other natives have been through there and killed some livestock a couple days before, and whenever the Cherokee came through, it was like kind of like all Indians are the same type of deal, and so I think it was like 42 Cherokees were killed, and after a year's time, they didn't give us justice, and so we went and killed 42 white people, just random white people, and then they wanted them all. They wanted us to send them men, and only 2 men got sent in. And there's like we couldn't find the rest of them, so it's like they sent a group of peace chiefs to South Carolina, and those peace chiefs wound up getting killed, except for 2 of them, I believe. And that kind of what led up. It was like a whole bunch of a series of bad events just led up to this situation.
What was sad is that, as he pointed out, that there had been some other nations that had, been on the frontiers of Virginia, basically raiding and looting. And these Cherokees had actually just been returning from Pennsylvania. They had been leading the army, the military, up there to Fort Duquesne to assist the British in taking control of Fort Duquesne. And they had actually been the allies of the folks. And they were returning to their homes when they were treacherously fired upon and killed on their return home. And like he said, they tried to get redress and petition for those people to be punished for what they had did to their warriors. That never happened. Also, during that time that they were out in the service of the British, they had left their families in the protection of some of these forts down here, and their women, kids, elders. And during that time that they were gone, some of the officers, the militia officers at these forts, actually sexually assaulted their wives and women family members at these forts while they were gone. So not only do they return home and get killed, but they find out that their families were being abused while they were gone. And you can imagine how much that must have enraged these guys, which is what led up to eventually attacking these forts.
What else? Any other questions? Did you all, while you were inside the fort, did you hear us coming and hollering?
Yes,
What y'all think about that?
it was scary.
Can you imagine if those were real bullets flying in?
Now,
I'm sure it was scary for those folks.
there's only 4 of us here.
Yeah.
You imagine 60 or 70 coming from 2 different directions.
We had a casualty of our own. I don't know if you guys heard it, but upon the last fire, Mr. Silverhorn here, after his last run up on the fort and firing and his return, obviously it's a little dark out here. He had forgot there's a fence.
Oh man.
He
took a
just
nosedive.
ran straight into the fence and he tumbled over it. Down he went.
Oh, it was glorious. Like his silhouette went bravely into the fort. He was running bravely back, and then you just see it go up in the air.
All you heard was and a thud on the ground, and he started laughing.
It would have been the last.
That was the one casualty of the.
There was one casualty when this raid actually happened, wasn't there?
Yeah, one Cherokee man was done, dude.
But yeah, it would have been that last shot. So if you heard it, right, this is what it would have sounded like. All of these hoops and hollers over there, right, and then one comes up real close. Did y'all hear that one? Yeah. And then as I'm going back, I'm the one casualty. I got taken out by a fence, but we're not going to say that.
So you guys got the real experience.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about what exactly prompted the Cherokee to take exactly the same number of lives as were lost from them, or any other systems of warfare that you might find amongst these Eastern peoples? Does any of that seem maybe a little strange or particular? Or does it seem fairly straightforward?
Was that a law? I mean, a Cherokee law?
Well, it's like a kind of just a Eastern native thing. It's like they call it the blood law, like a life for a life. Like say, like it wouldn't even have to be like if I killed someone, or if someone from their tribe got killed, and it was a man that was married to a woman, they might not necessarily come kill another Cherokee man. They might come and take me back, so I can replace the life that was taken.
I had a question about the weapons at this attack, because Native Americans were still using bow and arrows, especially with flames against some forts that I read about. Nothing like that happened here, is that correct?
That's correct. The bows and arrows this time will actually be pretty much phased out, except for hunting in the backwoods. Like maybe where I'm from, in the mid 18th century, might still have some bows and arrows they'd be using, but the vast majority of us have already switched over to the muskets. I mean, when the muskets are you can. I guess the bow and arrows has their advantages, but muskets.
What I had read, though, is they were lighting arrows to try to torch roofs.
Yeah.
No, where is this writing from? Like what?
Kentucky, Draper manuscripts, things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that did happen in other instances. I know in particular, like you're saying, the siege of Boonesboro and that, they did that. And also during the siege of Fort Pitt, during Pontiac's uprising, they did the very same thing. Those warriors that surrounded that fort, they shot flaming arrows. They weren't successful. They were able to put them out. You know what I mean?
Frequent what I read is there would be people, even children, would have buckets of water, and they would put the arrows out as quickly as they could.
Yeah, but at this particular engagement and the ones down here during this time, that did not occur from any of the documents that they've been.
I have a question about the blood law.
All right.
Would there have been discernment about, well, like if something happened and during maybe an altercation someone got killed, was it just black and white that, okay, then we're going to kill someone on that other side? Or
Well, it's either you either kill someone so the numbers will be even, or like I stated earlier, like if the person that got killed was of importance and had a family, they'd go try to capture a slave from the tribe that killed him to replace him, so there'd be someone to serve his functions. Like if they were to capture me, I would be filling the place of the person that hunts and provides for that family that lost their hunter and provider.
so even if they thought they were justified to take you, that doesn't matter.
Still dead.
You're still dead. So it's just black and white.
Sometimes also another way that they handled an instance like a situation like that is, especially among other tribes, other nations, a lot of times that the life of that person would be purchased in equivalent goods for that individual. So if a man was killed, then they know that blood law, this retribution had to take place. Well, the family of the person who was going to be killed in retribution could buy the life of their loved one by paying in trade goods or items. And a lot of times in the case, there were it was a kind of a standardization set amount, whereas women were actually worth more, worth more in goods for their life than men were in trade because of that, their roles in society and what they contribute. Yeah.
Now say like I was taking revenge on them, and then they take revenge on me. If that kept happening back and forth to an uneven level, sometimes we'd settle the dispute over. You guys are familiar with lacrosse? Sure. Well, we had a version. My tribe calls it stickball or anite. I don't know what their version's called, but it'd be agreed upon whose rules they'd be using. and then they'd play the game, and whoever won got the final say in the dispute, and then it'd be done with. Like maybe they'd get some territory in exchange, or maybe the losers would pay goods, to settle. If like too many lives have been taken on both sides, they'd finally settle it like that.
What does that mean in Cherokee?
What?
When you said like stickball?
It's like war's brother.
In Shawnee, we refer to it as hapasine, which means like how things are done or how things are agreed upon. What else?
Any other questions? We're the descendants.
Well, yeah, we're the descendants, not the ancestors. I mean, maybe one day we'll be ancestors.
And it's an important distinction too, and it's a point of clerical poignance for me, and I'm sure these guys too, that yes, we are descendants, but more importantly, and to nullify that point, we are indigenous people, we are native people, which means that we do these things, we partake in our ways, we speak our languages, we practice our religions. It's not just for the weekend. This is our life. This is our lifestyle. This is our way of being in our religion. And, that's kind of the big takeaway, is that even though when we come to things like this and we put on these events and we provide, access to this information for y'all, it's not something that we necessarily hang up when we're done.
If we treated it like that, if we just done it on weekends or whenever we've been, I guess, teaching the public, and then we just hung it up at home, it'd be disrespectful. Almost, because we have a responsibility to our ancestors to take the knowledge we're borrowing from them and pass it on to the next generation. So it's not just something we can just hang up. We have to continue doing it every day, because if it gets lost, it's our fault. So we don't really have a choice. Even though if I had a choice, I think I'd want to continue doing what I do every day anyways. I guess they could say the same.
That's a good question that you asked about, I think you're wanting to verify that we truly are real Shawnees, real Cherokees, right? And that is a big distinction that in today's, reenacting world or front, you do not see very often. Is the real people telling the story of their ancestors. 95% or better of these reenactments that happen across the East, in the terms of Native Americans, are portrayed by non-Indians. And you can make a distinction between those reenactors into two groups. Some of those Native reenactors at events are truthful with the public and do, openly tell the public that, no, I am not a Native American, I am not a member of the tribe, I am not, from that community that we're representing, but I'm interested in the history and Native culture, and I've done research, and this is what I found in my research and all that. And they're truthful to the public. But a vast majority of those non-Indian reenactors are fraudulent people who are claiming to be Indians and are claiming to represent us and speak for us, and basically are very inaccurate and perpetuating stereotypes and impersonating us.
They'll talk like, me, Cherokee.
Impersonation of a foreign entity.
Yeah, they'll like try to make us sound primitive and like we weren't intelligent people a lot of the time, just because it looks more Indian.
Or completely the opposite, because you also got to remember that positive stereotypes are just as harmful as the negative ones. So because they, I mean, you think about the way that we think about ourselves as Shawnee or as Cherokee, those aspects of our culture and our being that are considered to be a little bit darker than others or a little bit lighter than others are just as equally as important. If you're going to try and remove bad things of the past or negative things that happened in the past, that's just as detrimental to our human image as if you were to try and nullify the positive things that happened to us. So.
So those are very important distinctions, you know, for the public to understand when they go to an event. You know, you obviously want to verify that you're getting legit information from legitimate enrolled tribal members of federally recognized nations, right? One thing that I would like to commend Fort Dobbs and some of these other historic sites around the East is they are actively pursuing that distinction, making sure that when they try to, you know, to assist us in telling these stories, that they are, you know, engaging with legitimate descendants and legitimate people who come from these tribes, whose history is being represented, you know. And that's something that, you know, like I said, I want to commend, and I would hope that you guys would appreciate that they take the effort to do that, because a lot of historic sites do not do that. And what they do is they basically are just trying to, you know, make money off of an image. And these non-Indian reenactors who are claiming to